Hey y'all, Tom, ND3N here, just like it says on the hat, and thanks for dropping by my little shack in the corner for a Ham Shack chat, where this time we're going to take a look at mobile VHF and UHF radios available on the market currently. I don't have any affiliation or sponsorship deals with any ham radio manufacturer, but if one of them wants to drop a dime, I'd be happy to talk to them.
Call me!
Please take a moment to give me a like by popping that thumbs up icon. This video will look at mobile rigs, and I have sorted them by the manufacturer's suggested retail price. Let's just call it MSRP. I'm only going to give you a very brief description on each rig and show you a picture. But I've put a lot of information down in the video description. I've listed links to a few ham radio retailers, and again, no sponsors, and info links for each rig shown, including the owner's manual download page. So that way you can get the owner's manual. Bonus, huh? Before we get to the rigs, a few points for you to consider before buying your mobile rig. You want a safe place that won't interfere with your driving, a safe place in your vehicle, and won't draw your attention away from the road while driving. Now, if you plan on installing one in your wife's car, make sure she doesn't mind holes being drilled.
What were you thinking?
Don't ask me how I know. Check out the Repeater Book app. There's a link down below, and determine what capabilities of the repeaters around you have and where you may be traveling. If you don't have any 220 repeaters in your area, and that's a probable yes, then having a rig capable of 220 should not be a high priority for you. Look for the digital voice modes in your area. If everything around you is system fusion, then D-Star and DMR will pretty much be no use to you whatsoever. Once you've narrowed down your choices, review the information on the manufacturer's site and download the owner's manual and scan through them. A well-written owner's manual can be a good indicator of a well-designed and built radio. I'd recommend looking up how to program a repeater frequency pair and store it into a memory location. If you can understand those instructions without a rig, you'll easily be able to do it when you have that rig at hand. Finally, retailers continually have discounts and special deals on different rigs. Some of these rigs are very similar. Bounce them back and forth and see what the prices on the dealers are, and let that inform your choice. Check several before placing your order, or even better, when you visit their brick and mortar locations, if there's one local to you. Also, be sure to include the shipping cost and any accessory cost in your total price. For example, if you plan on using this rig as a home base, well, add in the cost of a power supply for it. Before we start to look at the rigs, I'll let you know that all of them use 13.8 plus or minus 15% volts DC. They all have CT/CSS tones and digital coded squelch. I'll let you know what the maximum current draw is when using the highest output power, and anything else special about these rigs. Now, I may have gotten a thing or two wrong along the way, or I didn't think that a given feature was important enough to mention. That's where you guys come in. Please feel free to correct or add to the info. Constructive criticism is always appreciated and welcome. Mark III. At $174.95, it is the least expensive on the list. This Alinco is a 2-meter FM only radio transmitter, and it transmits between 144 and 148 megahertz. Now, it receives between 136 and 174 megahertz on FM, and will also receive between 118 and 136 megahertz in the AM mode. That can be useful if you like listening to control towers at airports. This will allow you to monitor much of the airband. The output power is selectable at 50 watts, 20 watts, and 5 watts. It draws 11 amps when using full power. It has 100 memory channels and has an audio output of 2 watts into an 8 ohm speaker. The next rig is a Yaesu FT-2980R. At $179.95, it is an FM-only radio that transmits from 144 to 148 megahertz and receives from 136 to 174 megahertz. I sound like I'm repeating myself. Its output power is selectable between 80, 30, 10, and 5 watts. It will draw 15 amps at full power. It has 200 memory channels and an audio output of 3 watts into 4 ohms. Into 4 ohms, guys. Next on our list at $189.95 is the ICOM IC2300H. Like the Yaesu before it, this rig is a 2-meter FM rig with transmit between 144 and 148 and receive between 136 and 174 megahertz. Output power is selectable between 65, 25, 10, and 5 watts. Now, let me tell you, don't get too hung up on those higher output powers. Really, when you start breaking it down into decibels and the amount of oomph you're getting, it's a minimal increase. I believe they did that more for the marketing sake than for any engineering value. It has 270 memory channels and its audio output is 3.5 watts. Additionally, it will receive and monitor the NOAA weather channels.
Just get on the radio.
And here's another Alinco. The DR-138T comes in at $199.95. It is a 2-meter FM rig transmitting between 144 and 148, and it receives between 136 and 174. It has 3 selectable powers at 65, 25, and 10 watts. It draws 12 amps at full power. It has 100 memory channels and an audio output of 2 watts into 8 ohms. It will also receive and monitor the NOAA weather channel. The Alinco DR-438T is the 70 centimeter or 440 band version of the DR-138T, the 2-meter that we just discussed. It also costs $199.95 and transmits FM from 400 to 470 megahertz. The output power is 45, 25, or 10 watts. Just like its 2-meter counterpart, it requires 12 amps when using full power. It has 200 memory channels and an audio output of 2 watts into 8 ohms. The Alinco DR-138S is a 2-meter FM rig with an MSRP of $209.95. It transmits from 144 to 148 megahertz and receives from 136 to 174 megahertz. It has 3 output power settings at 60 watts, 25 watts, and 10 watts. It pulls 10 amps at high power and has 200 memory channels. It has an audio output of 2 watts into 8 ohms.
And now for something completely different.
Yet another Alinco radio. This one is the DR-06T, and it is the only 6-meter rig on our list. It comes in at $249.95. This receives and transmits from 50 to 54 megahertz. The output power is selectable at 50, 20, and 5 watts, and it has an 11 amp current draw at max power. It has 100 memory channels and audio at 2 watts into an 8 ohm load. The ICOM IC2730A is the first dual band radio on our list, and it also is the first rig with a removable front panel. That can come in very handy when planning on where you want to place your rig in your vehicle. It comes in at $289.95 and covers the 2 meter and 70 centimeter bands. Transmit is 144 to 148 and 430 to 450 megahertz, and receive is 118 to 174 and 375 to 550 megahertz. By the way, that anytime you see those lower frequencies, those are the air bands. In both VHF and UHF, the powers are selectable to 50, 15, or 5 watts. It has a 13 amp current draw. It has 1052 memory channels, and the output audio is 8 watts into 8 ohms. Bluetooth is an optional feature that, of course, will cost extra moolah.
Yeah, no money.
The Yaesu FTM-6000R is a dual band, 2 meter and 70 centimeter FM radio. Its cost is $319.95, and it transmits on 144 to 148 and 430 to 450 megahertz. It receives 108 to 137, the air band, then 118 megahertz to almost 1 gigahertz. The output power is selectable on both bands at 50, 15, and 5 watts. The rig will pull 10 amps when using full 50 watt output. Now this rig has 1052 memory channels and an output audio of 3 watts into 8 ohms. Bluetooth is also optional in this rig. Money. The ICOM ID-4100A, with a price of $329.95, is a dual band radio and transmits in FM and digital voice D-Star at 144 to 148 megahertz and 430 to 450 megahertz. It receives 118 to 174 megahertz and 230 to 550 megahertz. The output power is 50 watts, 15 watts, and 5 watts. The current is 13 amps when using the full power. This rig has 1052 memory channels, an audio output of 2 watts, and has built-in GPS. Again, Bluetooth is optional, but this time around they're also giving you an app where you can control your rig, available both in Android and iOS. Next up is another Alinco. The DR-735T, which is a dual band 2 meter, 70 centimeter FM radio, and can be yours for the low cost of $329.95. It transmits on 144 through 148 megahertz and 430 through 450 megahertz. Output power on both bands is selectable to 50, 20, or 5 watts. It will draw 12 amps on your high-powered settings. It's got 1,000 memory channels and an audio output of 3 watts into 8 ohms. This is the AnyTone AT-D587UV III Pro. It's a tri-band radio with 2 meters, 1.2 meter or the 220 band, and the 70 centimeter band, also known as 440 meters. The cost is $399.95, and it will transmit and receive from 136 to 174, 220 to 225, and 400 to 480 megahertz. It will also receive the air band between 108 and 137 megahertz. The output power on 2 meters and 70 centimeters is 45, 20, 10, and 1 watt, while the 220 band transmits at a maximum of 10 watts. It will draw 13 amps at those high power settings. It has 4,000 memory channels and an audio output of 3 watts into an 8 ohm speaker. The digital voice mode is DMR. It has Bluetooth built in, as well as APRS and DMR APRS. Now this is a rig that I currently own and is installed in my little Jeep out on my driveway. ICOM ID 5100A Deluxe costs $411.95. It is a dual band 2 meter 70 centimeter rig that will transmit FM and digital voice, D-Star again, from 144 to 148 megahertz and from 430 to 450 megahertz. On the receive side, the range is 118 to 174 and 375 to 550 megahertz. Output power is selectable to 50 watts, 15 watts, and 5 watts, and it has a 13 amp power draw on high power settings, 1000 memory channels, and an audio output of 2 watts into 8 ohms. Optionally, meaning at an extra cost, Bluetooth with an Android is available. The AnyTone AT-D587UV III Pro, I guess this is kind of the big brother to the same part number except the Pro version previously discussed, comes in at $459.95. It is a tri-brand rig with 2 meters, 1.2 meters, and 70 centimeters. It will transmit FM and digital voice, in this case DMR, from 144 to 148, 220 to 225, and 420 to 450 megahertz. It receives from 136 to 174, 220 to 225, and 400 to 450 megahertz. The output power on 2 meters is 50, 25, 10, and 1 watt. On the 1.2 meter band, the output power is either 5 or 1 watt. On the 70 centimeter band, the output power is 45, 25, 10, and 1 watt. This rig will draw 13 amps when max power is used. It has 4,000 memory channels and an audio output of 3 watts into an 8 ohm speaker. This rig has Bluetooth built in. But keep in mind, this is the kind of Bluetooth that is intended to be used for in-car entertainment systems. So if you want to listen to your radio over your car speakers, you can Bluetooth it in.
Will I get a radio too?
It's the Yaesu FTM-300DR, costing $469.95. It is a dual band 2 meter and 70 centimeter rig. It transmits on 144 through 148 and 430 through 450 megahertz. It receives from 108 to nearly 1 gigahertz, obviously with the cellular blocked. Output power is 50 watts, 25 watts, and 5 watts. It requires 11 amps of current, and it has 1,104 memory channels, and will have an output audio of 3 watts into an 8 ohm speaker. It has built-in Bluetooth and GPS. In addition to FM, it also uses the Yaesu digital voice known as System Fusion or C4 FM. Surprisingly, the only Kenwood on this list is the TM-V71A.
This is most surprising.
Which is a dual band 2 meter and 70 centimeter FM rig. Now this is going to cost you $469.95. It transmits from 144 to 148 megahertz and 430 to 450 megahertz. It receives from 118 to 524 megahertz and from 800 to 1300 megahertz or 1.3 gigahertz. The output power is a selectable 50, 10, or 5 watts. It draws 13 amps on high power settings. It has 1,104 memory channels and outputs 2 watts of audio into 8 ohms. The final entry on our list is the Yaesu FTM-400DR, which will run you $589.95. It transmits FM and digital voice from 144 to 148 and 430 to 450, and receives from 108 to megahertz to 1 gigahertz. This includes the airband. Its digital voice mode is System Fusion, C4FM. The output power is 50 watts, 20 watts, or 5 watts. It will draw 12 amps at the high power setting. It has 1,104 memory channels and 3 watts of audio output into an 8 ohm speaker. Bluetooth, GPS, and APRS are all built in. And that completes our list. For those of you who are keeping count, that was 17 radios. Any one of them might work for you, but only a couple of them are truly going to suit you, meet your needs and budget. Now, I provided very brief information on each radio, but I think I made up for it with the number of links down in the video description that show you where to buy and more specific information so you can go out and do additional research. Hopefully the list I've just provided you will help you narrow it down a little bit. Then you go look up some stuff on the manufacturer's website or on the retail websites as well, and narrow it down a little further. And then I gave you the tip about going out and getting the owner's manual when you get it down to 2 or 3. And that should bring you right down to the radio you really want. And then if there's more than one that suits you, don't spend any more money than you need to, but, make up your own mind. It's your shack, it's your rig, it's your operations. Now, while you're down taking a look at the links in the description, please leave a comment. I won't advise you on which radio you should purchase, but if you ask me, I can help maybe clarify some points and help you decide which radio would work best for you. I'm not going to make that decision for you. That's your decision to make. I'll remind you, I don't have any sponsorships with any manufacturers or retailers. So I don't have a dog in this fight.
I have no dog in this fight. I'm just saying that this will win.
Please take a moment and give me a like by popping that thumbs up icon. Please share this video with your friends, especially on social media, and specifically friends that might be looking for a new mobile rig, whether it's their first one or they're just upgrading. I was surprised at the upgrades that are out there now. Finally, please consider subscribing to this channel for more ham-related chats. It is a convenient way to get notified when I put out a new video, and all my content is gathered together in one convenient location for your perusal. Thanks for dropping by my little shack in the corner for a ham shack chat about mobile radios. As always, I'm Tom, ND3N, just like it says on the hat, and I'm always at your service. 73 for now, happy mobiling, and I'm out.